So we're here at Northeastern University talking to Heidi Kevoe-Feldman, who is Associate Professor in the Department of Communication Studies here at NEU. Heidi, thank you very much for accepting to do a DARGchive interview.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yes. So the first question that we usually ask is, how did you get interested in conversation analysis?
The first time I heard about it was when I met Jenny Mandelbaum at Rutgers. She was one of 3 teachers in my first PhD program, my first PhD class. And at the time I thought I wanted to do media studies because I studied symbols on the internet. That's what I was interested in looking at. And Jenny came in with Stalled, and she handed out transcripts. And then she played it and said, "What's going on?" And I said, "We could do this for a living, for a degree." And she said, "Yes." I said, "This is great." So I followed her around for years, and I proposed to her marriage in a way. "Please, will you be my advisor?" And she took me under her wing, and then that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, amazing.
So what was it
Very
like
lucky.
then?
Where, at Rutgers?
Yep.
Well, I was, when I got there, which was a long time ago, it was just Jenny. And she was the only conversation analyst in the department. And then shortly after I arrived, Jeff Robinson came on board. And he gave his job talks on apologies, and it was amazing. And then other graduate students came on board, and then Galena was hired, and then suddenly we had this community. And so working with, Galena and Jeff and Jenny, it was a proper CA training. I felt like whatever they were doing, I was learning, and it was great.
That sounds amazing.
It was amazing.
Can you talk a little bit more about your PhD?
What about my PhD?
So what was your research about?
Initially, I was interested in parenting. And Jenny had her, I guess maybe they're somewhat famous, her dinner tapes. And I digitized all of her tapes as part of my research assistantship. And I was like, well, I'm going to look at parenting. What is parenting? What is it all about? And so my secondary area was family communication. But after going to UCLA, which I did, and took classes with John and Manny and Jean and Jeff Raymond, I came back saying, nope, I'm going to do institutional talk because I could at least find things where parenting just felt very mysterious to me at the time. Maybe because I wasn't a parent, I don't know, but I think other people do that work really well. It just didn't work for me. So I changed to customer service. I had access, I had data, and so I had a dissertation.
All right, so what did you find?
I found that it was really hard to write a dissertation. I mean, most of the training I did was single case analysis. So learning the tools, learning how to work with cases, and really talking about things and getting deep into it. But then we had to build collections, and it was hard. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Maybe I thought I knew what I wanted, but then Jenny and Jeff would guide me a little bit, and then I'd go, but it worked. It worked out. So we looked at responses to things like status inquiries and how multi-component terms are built, and then I really became interested in customer service interaction. Just how service representatives might withhold things from customers, and how customers can pick up on withholding, and how customers would complain but without complaining. And so the dissertation, I think, just created a good foundation for me to branch off into other areas that I wanted to explore. But I will say, I will admit, Jenny and Jeff were right, that I have to start with the basic foundation before I start traveling off into my magical mystery tour of things that happen in the data. But it was good. It was really good.
All right, fascinating.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the UCLA Summer Institute. When were you there? What was it like?
So Jenny and Jeff both had a very good, strong relationship with Manny, and asked if I could go out there to take classes with him. So part of the agreement was that I had to do all his tapes, his turn-taking tapes, and then I went out and I sat in his classes, and it just so happened that year was the Summer Institute. So I applied and I joined the Summer Institutes, which I think for some years are legendary. I mean, people have, collaborated on really great research projects. I think the moaning, whinging, whining, complaining, from what I understand, is a product of one of the summer institutes. And it was, my first time really, I wouldn't say, was it my first workshop? Yeah, I think it was my first workshop, but it was really intense. I mean, the idea of homework every night. But it was fun because Jenny was there, and Alexa was there, and who's now at Rutgers, and Galena was there, and here I am with my mentors doing homework with them, and they also had to do homework, and so it was just fun being at coffee shops until midnight, figuring out parking spaces in Los Angeles, and then being in these very intense small breakout data sessions with John and Manny and Jean, and it was pretty amazing.
That sounds like so much fun.
It was fun. That's what CA, but I was told again and again, I can't say that it's fun and it's cool because it's empirical science, so it's serious. But it is fun. It's fun.
So for many researchers, especially conversation analysts, they say they have these moments when things happen to them. They meet somebody, or they read a paper, they listen to a presentation, that kind of changes the way they see their topic, the way they do say. Do you have such moments, Kate?
I have a lot of those moments. I think every time I go to a conference and I see somebody, I have one of those moments. But the most memorable moment was when I met John Heritage and Manny Shegloff for the very first time, because I was very new. I may be in my second year in PhD coursework, and I went out to this conference in Vancouver. It was sexuality and health. It was a sex conference, but there were talks and workshops, and I was due to meet Manny and John, and I did, but the person I remember the most was Celia Kitzinger, who came up to me and said, "Oh, you're Heidi!" And I was like, "I am." And then her and Jenny, of course, are close and friends, and she said, "Jenny told me to look out for you here." And so I also took workshops with Celia. She has more energy than anybody that I've ever met in my life, and just really kind of brought a lot of the data to life. And so that was my preparation. And then when I met John and Manny, it was, like, wow, this is, it was like, here are the people that, really created this field, and I have an opportunity to learn from them. So it was, I definitely appreciate that conference. But, I think meeting everybody, and the fun part about CA is that everybody's so incredibly humble. I don't find that it's maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't find it's a field of big egos. And so every mentor is welcoming, and they want to teach you, they want to learn from you. It's a very mutual, always feel mutual respect. So I think that's what I like a lot.
All right. So we're here in your office now at Northeastern. And this was your first job after your PhD, right?
It was.
Could you talk a little bit about how you got this position?
It's very unorthodox how I got this job. Yes and no. So I saw the advertisements for this job just after I had completed my proposal for my dissertation. And I think I went into Jenny's office with the flyer, and I said, I'm going to apply. And she said, no, it's too soon. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. And then everywhere I went on Rutgers campus, I saw the flyer. I would be at Au Bon Pond getting a bagel, and there's the flyer. I would be in the ladies' restroom, and there's the flyer. Everywhere I went, there was the flyer. And I said, well, I'm going to apply just to see. Let's just see what happens. So Jenny and Jeff helped me write up my CV and make it fancy. And then the next thing you know, I got an interview, and the next thing you know. And then it became apparent that I was getting an offer for the job, which I found out about when I was actually on my horse. I took the phone call, so I ride horses and talk on the phone at the same time, and I got the offer, and I hung up, and I don't think I was through my first chapter yet. And then it became, I need to finish. So I finished my dissertation in 3 months to get this job.
Oh, wow.
And I think maybe I do tell everybody I worked 22-hour days, and Jenny and Jeff were incredibly supportive and helped me all along the way until eventually Jenny, I think, realized that I hadn't showered in a long time and to come live in my basement. So I was in her basement, and she was right there the whole time. It was like, that's what I mean, like the amount of support, and that we were delivering my dissertation out of the printer, and then I drove it to the post office, mailed it to the committee, and then I slept for 2 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that it's a very unorthodox way, but I think as a conversation analyst, there's so few jobs out there for people just for CA, and so the position here was an Org Comp scholar, and I had my master's in organizational communication, and I worked in corporate for a long time, and so it was a good fit, and it is a good fit. So it worked out.
So can you talk a bit about the classes that you're teaching here and your approach to teaching, which is quite original?
Well, so the classes that I came in to have to teach a couple classes they needed to be taught. So principles of organizational communication, crisis communication, theories of conflict and negotiation. And then I said, please let me teach one interaction class. So I made a nonverbal communication class, which is not allowed to be called nonverbal communication because there's a nonverbal communication class in the psychology department. So our nonverbal communication class is nonverbal social interaction. And I modeled that largely off of what I learned in Gene's class on body behavior and his work with Jeff Raymond, and just so I put that together. And I don't teach that one anymore, but it's on the books, and now postdocs teach it, so it's really great. And this year I get to teach analyzing conversations in everyday life, and I'm like,
all right.
Finally, it took 9 years, but I did it. So now we have an official CA class at Northeastern. Yes, my approach to teaching, I don't know what my approach is. It depends on the students. I teach writing intensive classes.
What are some of the ways you kind of get them hooked? Or
I just show them data. In every one of my classes, I just bring them a piece of data. That's what hooked me, right? And so for my conflict and negotiation class, I just pull from the classic CA archive, and Debbie and Shelley. Debbie, Shelley, what's the deal? And for my conflict class, I say is that they're a conflict, and students are like, there's a conflict, and then before you know it, they're looking at data, they're making observations, they're picking out things in the transcript that provide evidence for why this is a typical thing for one of them or both of them, and it's great. So I have them hooked on that. And the other thing is communication students are comp students because they like to watch people, and sometimes we just sit and watch people and make of whatever it is they're doing. We do all sorts of things.
So did you do any preaching experiments?
Of course I did. So in my nonverbal class, I decided to do a breaching experiment, and so I had the students stand in front of the library doing nothing, and we did nothing. There were about 15 students who stood and did nothing, and it was great. We videotaped it and we brought it back into the class to observe, and what they liked the most was that we attracted the attention of the university police, who thought that doing nothing was highly suspicious.
Wow.
And it was great because it just proved the point, right? That doing nothing is an activity. You can't just do nothing.
That is very cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
So from teaching, now going to your research, you're working on something new, right? So you've left service encounters behind you and are now working with 911 calls?
Yes. Yes. So again, the way that I got into 911, aside just from the training that I had, I am a person who listens to other people's conversations for fun, and I also am a person who butts into other people's conversations for fun sometimes. And I overheard somebody at Northeastern talking about 911 calls and police-citizen interaction, and I stopped and joined the conversation and introduced myself and said, I also am interested in that. And The next thing I knew, I had a meeting at Harvard University because the person who I met and butted in their conversation was the assistant to the chief of police. So I started working with Harvard, and they wanted me to work on their check wellness calls. So with the students, a lot of parents call concerned about the students, and I started doing that, and yeah, it just took off from there. So I was looking at the organization of the questioning and the turn order, and I made a finding, and then they said great, and they included it now, in their training, and then it went from there.
So what kind of studies, what kind of things are you interested in?
The project they gave me was analyzing silence, and they have in their call center, the problem is with cell phones, the phones are very flat, right? And so they get a lot of butt dials now, missed dials. And in a wireless call center that gets cell phone calls, this increases the volume. But the problem is when somebody calls who really needs help, what they call an active silent caller, the dispatchers are likely to treat that as just another one of those butt dial calls. And so the problem they had was, how do we convince dispatchers that they need to treat every silenced call as another first call, as a real call. And so I analyzed silence in their calls, and what I found in their active silent call that they provided was that those callers need at least 4 seconds to respond to prompts like press 1 if this is an emergency, and dispatchers were not giving them that amount of time. They were just running through the protocol. So they would wait a long time in the beginning, like hello, hello, and then they would wait. But as soon as they said, if this is an emergency, press 1, you can hear them completely, like think that this is a misdial, and they would wait maybe 2 seconds. But when they waited 4 seconds, they would consistently get people pressing the number 1.
Wow.
And so that became part of their policy. So now that's policy in the state, and that article was published in their journal with their international academy and presented. But now I'm on my own projects. So now I'm working on, how do they deal with emotional callers, which there was some work done on that, but now I'm finding about like caller focused and patient focused directives, and they love it. They just absolutely love it.
Fascinating.
And now I'm all about the emergency medical dispatch stuff.
And you've gone to shadow the dispatchers.
I did. So part of the agreement that I had with them is they didn't just want to hand me calls because they felt that I would just get a flash drive filled with silent calls, and how would I understand what it's like a day in the life of a dispatcher. And so I had to shadow the dispatchers. So I shadowed them day and night. I would go on all 3 shifts. I ate ice cream with them at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they haze me, so I'm part of their culture, their community now. And they also paid for my training, so I'm a certified emergency medical dispatcher.
Wow.
So now my relationship with them is a little different. I'll go in and just tell them this is what I'm looking for, and they give me a computer. But they always let me shadow the dispatchers, and that's probably what I do when I want to relax a little bit. I go and I shadow dispatchers and listen to incoming calls. But the best part really is talking to the dispatchers and just being part of it. It's a great community.
That sounds really fascinating. So just to round things up, and I'm wondering whether you can speculate where you think you might be taking this in the future. You wanna?
I don't know. I feel like the data takes me places in the future. From talking to the dispatchers, I know what their concerns are. I know what trouble they have with the calls, and so I get kind of a member's perspective of the problems that they have, and those are the problems that I'm looking for. And so once I hear that, then I'll write down a little note, and then I casually listen to some data and go, oh, that's one of those things that they were talking about, and I just pop it into a folder, and then can find a few more. But yeah, I have no idea. It always depends, right? Like, opportunities for data collection are always available, and it could be that I get into doing more emergency medical dispatch, which is what I would be interested in doing. It could be that I find myself working with the fire or ambulance service. I'm probably able to go and shadow the ambulance drivers and do ride-alongs, but I don't want to, because I think that would be gross. But I mean, it's a level of intensity that I'm not prepared for. It could be going into just following their technology, and not to get all the CA people in the world excited, but part of the technology is going to be video 911. It's already available, people are already doing it, but the problem is that dispatchers are civilians, so they're not prepared to see the things that callers are going to show them on the 911 calls that are video. The kinds of things that happen, like the police see stuff, but they see it after the fact, right? And now dispatchers are going to have to see things in progress if they take it that far. And people already have it on YouTube, but for it to be a 911 call that now you have to prepare and send a vehicle for, it's going to raise the level. But there's just still so much work to be done just in your regular call that, I don't know if that's a place down the road. There's always interaction with horses and people. So.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for a wonderful interview.
Well, you're very welcome.